Gwinnett County Public Library presents Photography 101. My name is Ashley, a Learning Lab specialist at GCPL. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the basic setup for the mirrorless Fuji X-T3. This camera can be used for both video and still imagery. If you want to learn more about what all these settings mean and how to control operating the camera, check out our other Photography 101 videos. First, I'm going to show how to take the lens off and on. On the bottom of the lens here is the lens release button. I'll hold that down and then rotate the lens towards the release button until you feel it release. And we can see this little red dot right here. On our lens, we have a red dot right here. I'll line those two up and then twist it away from the release button until you hear a click. Next, we'll make sure we have a battery and a memory card and that we know how to put the camera on a tripod. On the bottom of the camera, you'll see this little release here, and you push on the little green button and the battery will come out. To put the battery back in, match the orange with the orange, push it until this clicks, and then just push that down. To put the camera on the tripod, take the release plate off of the tripod and screw it into the bottom of the camera. Tighten it with your hand and then center this, then use a quarter to tighten the last bit. On the tripod, make sure this part is loosened all the way out. Put in the plate and tighten it back up. Then you can use the bottom knobs to place the camera the way that you'd like, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. To be able to shoot anything, you always need a memory card. On the right side, open up the side flap, and you can see there are two SD slots. To remove, push down and pull out the memory card. Most of our cameras in the Learning Labs will have SD memory cards, and you can see this is 32 gigabytes. To put it back in, place it in the slot, push, and close. On the top of the camera, we'll switch on next to the shutter button. And our first step should be to format the memory card. So to do that, we'll go into Menu. We'll use the arrows to go to the bottommost wrench menu, Setup menu here. Go to User Setting, Format, Slot 1, and then it says, erase all data, is that okay? So this will erase everything that's on the memory card, so make sure you have everything off of this that you'll need. But it's important to format every time before we shoot to make sure that our card doesn't corrupt as we're using it. So we'll press OK. Now it's ready to be used. On the side of the camera is where we will find our various attachments. So pull that open, and then you'll see the top is the microphone jack, the next is the headphone jack, next is the USB or the charging cable, and an HDMI. So if you're shooting video and you want to use a microphone like the Rode mic, you would plug that in here, and then you can check your levels with a headset. To attach the microphone, you would slide it into the hot shoe right here. Next, we're going to go over the basic settings for shooting video and doing still photography. Okay, so to be able to access the image versus video, on the top, you need to make sure you're either on a video or a photo setting. So if I have it on S, I can change my image quality If I have it on the little video icon, then I can change my video settings. So once I have the mode over here set to S, or shooting mode, I can go into my menu, go to the topmost menu, which is image quality settings. And the main settings I'm interested in are image quality. On a Fuji, your options are fine and normal, which are JPEGs, and RAW, or you can shoot JPEG and RAW at the same time. So if you know how to shoot on RAW and process RAW files, I recommend selecting RAW. If you're not sure what that means and you don't know how to shoot on RAW, select either fine or normal JPEG setting. Fuji cameras also have a film simulation mode. I think that this is actually really nice. The color science on the Fuji cameras are excellent, and so you can play around with these if you'd like. Then select white balance to auto. If you're shooting on RAW, you can change this later, and if you're not, the auto white balance usually works pretty well. Then go all the way down to color space. There's two options, sRGB and Adobe RGB. If you know how to shoot on RAW, and if you ever plan on printing the images out, you should select Adobe RGB. Everybody else select sRGB. Press the shutter button halfway down to get out of the menu, and we're ready to move on. For video, we want to go into our menu, and using the arrows, we will go to the movie setting icon. Then the main settings you need to select are movie mode. This looks very complicated and there's lots of different settings. 9 times out of 10, the settings that you'll need for your purposes will be FHD, which stands for Full HD, 16:9, then 29.9p, these are the frames per second, so that's basically 30, and then you'll select 100 megabits. On the bottom, you can see that it lets you know what that setting is. So this is 1920 by 1080, that's pixels, and this lets you know how many minutes with the card that you have that you'll be able to do. So you'll see as I change these settings, that amount will change. And press OK. Then go down to this setting and just set it to H.264. And then movie compression, you want to be on long GOP. It'll likely set that for you, but if it's not grayed out, then you'll change it to that. And just set your white balance to auto. You can also find a PDF in the description of the video with a written checklist of these settings if you'd like to see them written out. Next, we want to let our camera know how we want to create our exposure. Okay, then something different about Fuji's than any of the other cameras in the Learning Lab or that you may have used is that a Fuji is designed after a film camera. So all of the major settings for shutter speed and aperture and all those things are on the body of the lens on these various dials instead of being inside of the menu of the camera. So if you learned photography on a film camera, then this will come very naturally to you as it will be basically the same. But if you have not, then it may take a little adjusting to get used to it. So if you would like to shoot the camera on full auto, you would take the shutter speed dial and put it on A. On the lens, there is a setting that's either a little aperture icon or a little A. You'd select that to A, and you'd put the ISO wheel on A. So this is basically the exposure triangle right on your camera, and if you set all 3 of those to A, then your camera will be on full auto. If you want it to be on shutter speed priority, which means that the shutter speeds are the priority, then you simply just turn the wheel and line up the shutter speed that you'd like with this white dot. Now the camera is automatically selecting the ISO and the aperture for you, but you are selecting the shutter speed. If you'd like it to be on aperture priority, you'd put the shutter speed dial back on A. You'd push that little button to be on the aperture icon instead of on the A. And then this little wheel here on the lens is where you'll then set your aperture. If you'd like to be in control of your ISO, you simply will set your ISO. If you are on any kind of auto setting and you don't think the camera is making an exposure that you think looks good, you can use this exposure compensation wheel here, where you can go on the plus side to make the image brighter, and you can go on the negative side to make the image darker. In the center will be the setting that your camera thinks is correct. For video, we have already set up in the menu to do full HD at 30 frames per second. This always means that the shutter speed should be at a 60th of a second, because our shutter always needs to be set at twice the frames per second. So we know that our shutter speed needs to be set at 60. So if you're shooting video, go ahead and put your shutter speed dial at 60. Put your ISO between 200 and 800. 400 is probably good. And then if you're not sure how to do exposure, just set the lens to A and let the camera set that for you. You can use the exposure compensation dial to make the image darker or lighter. If you know how to do full exposure, then obviously set the lens to aperture and you can set your aperture yourself. Some of the Fuji lenses will have the apertures written on the actual lens, and you can move the aperture ring to select the aperture that you would like. If your lens doesn't have the apertures written on them, this aperture ring is working the exact same way, except you can only see the number on the back of the camera instead of also being able to see it on the lens, which I'll show you in a minute. Next, let's take a little closer look at the lens and the front of the camera. So here is, just to point out again, is the switch to go between auto apertures and using the ring to select the apertures yourself. Right in front of that is the zoom ring. This will allow you to zoom in and zoom out. You can learn more about zoom and focal length in my other videos if you're interested to know what that means. And then another important thing is this MCS on the front of the camera. These are your focusing modes. So M is manual focus, which will allow you to use this focusing ring that's right in front of the zoom ring on the lens. Then there is C for continuous. This will continue to focus the image as you move. And single, which will focus in on one thing and it will stay there. That is my preferred focus mode. To autofocus, hold the shutter button halfway down and the area that's in focus will turn green and make a noise. If it cannot focus, it will turn red. This is usually because you're too close to your subject for it to focus. So either zoom out or step further away from your subject and then it should work. You can also use this little knob here to move around the point of focus that you want the image to focus on. And you can hold down autofocus lock to move your frame if you'd like. To view the image, you can either look on the back of the camera for live view, or you can look through the viewfinder here. If I put my face or my hand up to the eye cup, you'll see that the screen will disappear because the image is now appearing inside of the eye cup. When I take my hand or my face away, the image will show up again on the live view screen. The back screen on the Fuji does not flip all the way around like some of the other cameras, but by pressing this little button on the side, it can flip up and it can kind of move and oscillate, but it cannot be flipped all the way around, so don't try to force it to do that. Then, of course, to either take an image or to start recording, hold down the shutter button all of the way, and it'll start to record or take an image. To stop, just press the button again. To review your images and videos, go to the Playback button next to the eye cup, and you can use the arrows to toggle through. Then I just want to take a quick look at the back of your camera. This will show you all of your settings. On the very bottom, you can see the shutter speeds that we've selected on this dial. 60 for video. Here you can see your f-stop or your aperture. And as I turn the aperture ring that's on the lens, I can see that number change. Here my ISO dial. As I change that, you can see the number here changing. To the side, because I am on my video shooting mode, I can see my audio levels. This is my light meter. If you know how to do manual exposure, you can see that here. Then on the top, you can see your various settings and how much space you have left on your memory card. So I can see the video settings that I selected in my menu, which is full HD, 30 frames per second. And with the memory card that I have in there, it's saying that I can record for 39 minutes and 7 seconds. If I change it to a shooting mode, like single image, you can see that those settings have now gone away. It now says RAW, which is the setting I selected, and 540, which is how many images I can take based on that setting and how much space I have left in my memory card. I also have put a horizon line here. When it's green, that means the image is centered, and when it's not, means the image is not centered. If you'd like to check and change all of your settings quickly, you can press the little Q here, which stands for Quick Menu, and this will let you quickly change any of your main settings that we selected in our menu earlier. The last step when you're finished is always to take out your memory card. It's on the side. Take out your memory card and copy your files onto your computer or memory stick. Then put the memory card back in. And if you'd like, you can reformat the card for the next person.
Thank you for joining us for Photography 101. To book an appointment to use our learning labs and photography equipment, go to gwinnettpl.org/meeting rooms. Please leave your questions in the comments or contact us at learninglabs@gwinnettpl.org.